We are ready.
Okay. All right. So welcome to the April 21st, 2022 meeting of the CB6 Public Safety Committee. I'm Matt Roberts, chair of the committee, and this meeting is called to order at 6:31 this evening. We're joined by CB6 Assistant District Manager Brendan Berth. Members of the public, you can raise questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature of Zoom. If there's time following the committee discussion, we'll field questions from the public. We still need a volunteer to take minutes for tonight's meeting. So if you are able to take minutes, please raise your hand through Zoom. And you guys are all familiar with the Doodle sign-up sheet, the chat. Do I have a volunteer to take minutes? I will know if no one wants to volunteer, then we'll just have to appoint someone. It's a very easy process. Brendan, who has not done the minutes?
I know, just give me a moment. And let me double check. So I know it has been some time since Eric and Seema and Sean have taken minutes. So if one of you might be able to take minutes.
I'm not in front of a computer this meeting, but I can definitely sign myself up for next meeting if we're still needing someone, but I can definitely do it next month.
Duly noted.
Okay, so we still need someone for tonight.
Correct. And just to let you all know, whoever takes minutes, I will send the minutes template tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, with this new form, it should not take more than 15, 20 minutes. It's very quick.
I'm watching my daughter at the same time, so I'm happy to do it. I'm just a little nervous about having dual attentions. That's my only concern, but happy to do it.
You know
and
what?
I know you guys review closely, so
I could do it. Sorry, this is Seema. I'll be in front of a computer in just a second. I can do it. I'll just do it this month.
Thanks, Seema.
Okay. And I apologize. I'm happy to do it. I just don't want to miss stuff.
And just so everybody knows, I mean, you can always refer back to the video on YouTube. So
that's helpful.
All right. So that takes us to the attendance, and Brendan will conduct the roll call.
Committee members, I will call your name and you will unmute yourselves. When your name is called, please say present. I will announce if there is quorum. Azia Bobby. Up here, Azia. Stu Desser.
Present.
Eric Goldberg.
Present.
Steve O.
Present.
Matt Roberts.
Present.
Seema Shaw.
Present.
Sean Sherman.
Present.
And Lou Sapersky.
Yo.
Okay, we have a quorum.
All right, thanks, Brendan. So that takes us to the adoption of the agenda, and the agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and appears on the screen before you. So committee members, if there's no objection, we will adopt the agenda as stated. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. And committee members, the minutes from the February 17th meeting were distributed ahead of time by the board office. If there's no objection, we will adopt these minutes as drafted. If you object to adopting these minutes, you may raise your hand. Seeing no objections, the minutes from the February 17th, 2022 meeting are adopted and will be available on the CV6 website tomorrow. So that brings us to the ground rules. I think everybody's familiar with this. No one may speak until granted the floor. Committee members, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand for Zoom. As a reminder, the chat function should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you're having or to state in writing information like an email address that was already stated on the record during the meeting. When a committee member is given the floor to speak, I'll identify you. You can unmute yourself. And as a reminder, we're required by state law to create a verbatim transcript of the meeting, so please keep your questions and comments succinct during the discussion. So we'll follow the agenda here. So committee business. So I think most of you are familiar with the February 17th meeting where we had a larger presentation from the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, and we heard about a lot of different things across all of their strategies. And I think there were some follow-up questions. The committee wanted to get a little bit more detail on the Small Business Alliance. And as I mentioned last week, Brendan and I were on a call with the District Attorney's Office and some other stakeholders throughout the borough to talk about this. And there were a lot of shoplifting issues, and that's very prevalent throughout our district. So I thought we'd take a little bit of a deeper dive here. It doesn't have to be tremendously long, but we have Estelle back with us, and also Eric Straza, our new liaison with the District Attorney's Office. So I guess, Estelle, I'll turn it over to you if you want to speak for a few minutes, and then maybe we'll take a couple of questions. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thanks for having us back. And my name is Estelle Stryker Santiago, and I'm the director of the Community Partnerships Unit here at the Manhattan DA's office. Just real quickly, what our unit is mission driven, and our mission is to increase trust between the community and our office and sort of law enforcement in general, to raise awareness about different public safety issues, community safety issues, also about the role of a prosecutor, what the district attorney does, and specifically the vision of our DA, Alvin Bragg. Another part of our mission is to ensure access to our office for all communities that we serve in Manhattan. We do a lot around ensuring that we're getting out to every community, language access, and ensuring that the prosecutors and other professional staff at our office have an understanding of the different cultural differences throughout Manhattan, and that we're aware of those and are ensuring that people feel comfortable coming forward and talking to us about their situations. And then ultimately, the mission is to create partnerships, right, that prevent crime and increase public safety and improve the quality of life of the people we serve. And one of the ways that we do that, we have a team of people, and one of our teams has people assigned geographically, right? So we have Eric here, who will be attending your meetings on a regular basis, bringing back your concerns to our office, and bringing information from our office to you. Since we do have a new DA, we've been coming pretty frequently and bringing other people from our office to talk to all of you and other community boards, and we look forward to continuing to do that. Today, I believe specifically you were interested in kind of getting an update on our Small Business Alliance. And the DA formed the Small Business Alliance a couple months ago to address the very large uptick in shoplifting crimes that have been impacting all of Manhattan from the top up in Inwood all the way down to the first precinct. And so the Alliance is made up of bid members. We started actually by meeting with bids and getting their input and their suggestions, which is what led to this. And so we've had 3 larger meetings with the full Alliance. And then we've created smaller focus groups that really look at each community and how the shoplifting is impacting the communities. But we have an overarching kind of plan, a 5-point plan that we're working on, and that is still rolling out. But I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the 5 different points, and then open it up to any questions that you have. So the first point is our goal and our strategy is to reduce recidivism. We've heard a lot of concerns about people that are shoplifting and coming back out and doing the shoplifting again. And so the way that we're working on that is we have learned from looking at the cases that there's a small percentage of people that are really driving most of the shoplifting. And so we're taking a really good look at those individuals and making sure that we're utilizing our resources to handle those cases. We will leverage our litigation support unit to develop all of the paperwork necessary to request bail when appropriate on these individuals when they re-enter the system or are brought to us via a warrant. So we are aware of those individuals that we want to be looking at closely. We also, though, know that we can't arrest our way or prosecute our way out of this problem, and that there are some individuals who could benefit and may stop their behavior if they were to get some programming and services. So you may already know that the DA developed a brand new unit that has never been done before called Pathways to Public Safety. And the purpose of that unit is to really find sort of the off-ramps where we might be able to get people services so that they will stop the behavior that's leading them to commit the shoplifting offenses. Again, that's been rolling out over the past few months, and we're looking forward to seeing where that goes and adding resources to that particular unit. Another part which is connected to that unit, so this is the second sort of bullet point, is expanding programmatic solutions. So we really want to work with the community to find community-led solutions to this problem. That can include, funding different type of programming, something sort of like the neighborhood navigators, where this is more for individuals that, first few times, who could benefit from being connected with somebody who maybe can help to address the issues that are leading to the shoplifting. And so we've been meeting with service providers for the past few months, really getting to know what's out there and assessing what we think will work. And also looking into areas where there could be more resources put into programming. There is definitely a need for more programming in some areas of Manhattan. So we're looking at that. So the third component of what we're doing is we're building proactive investigations. The district attorney assigned one specific person in our investigation division. His name is Christopher Conroy. He's been in the office for a long time and handled very complex cases. And what he's going to be doing is developing evidence and patterns about organized operations that are sort of running these shoplifting situations. Sometimes you might see young people doing it, but they may be connected to a organized operation. And we want to build cases to really, find and prosecute the people who are really taking advantage of younger people to do the shoplifting, and also taking advantage of our business owners. We're also working on some legislation in that area that will increase our ability to prosecute those types of cases. Our fourth component is that we're improving coordination with our local businesses. And so, for example, Eric is the liaison to sort of the middle of Manhattan, and so the Midtown precincts, and to this community that we're talking to now. So if any of you are small business owners and you have a case where there's been an arrest and you want to find out what happened to that case, we are here to give you that information. So you can contact us and we can tell you what happened with the case, what's the status of the case, any kind of public information that is available about the case. And so that's through our community partnerships unit that we're doing that. We're also going to work with local businesses to develop a set of best practices, including how to best maintain records and prevent retail theft. And that's sort of a part of the coordination with the local businesses. And then our fifth component is improving our coordination with the NYPD. And we're doing this at all different levels. The DA has met with the commissioner, the DA has met and his executive staff, and some of us have met with the commanding officers in Manhattan North. And just this week, we met with all the commanding officers in Manhattan South. And our goal is really to coordinate more on cases and increase the communication in that area so that we can reduce the recidivism. And so in the day-to-day, so I talked about that the DA is meeting on high levels. Additionally, our crime strategies unit on the day-to-day basis is talking to the commanding officer and the local police officers about cases when they're making arrests, so that we have sort of the background and information that we need to be really thoughtful in how we handle each case. So that's kind of an overview of the 5 main points that we're working on. And then within our different focus groups, there's other different strategies that are coming out. We find that each community has a different focus that they want to put into this. So for example, 125th Street, the bid, the head of the 125th Street bid is one of our co-chairs. And she has really worked with many city agencies to come up with a hub that is now located on 125th Street, where different city agencies can be there to address some of the issues that are on 125th Street, including shoplifting, but also other kind of quality of life issues that are happening. And so that's a strategy that came out of that particular area. On the Lower East Side and in Chinatown, we're looking into this idea of the navigator type of approach. So each, as I said before, each community kind of has different needs, and we're in the process of meeting with each of them to kind of roll out what will work best for the communities. So that's an overview of our strategy, and I'm happy to take questions.
Sure. So let's open it up to the committee for any questions. There were a few different topics there. Does anyone have any questions? Seema.
Thank you for coming and sharing. Can you just give us some background on how many members are in the Small Business Alliance? And you mentioned 125th Street bid as one of the co-chairs. Are there others?
Estelle, you're on mute.
Sorry. We have 3 co-chairs. I don't know the exact number in the Alliance right now. I could get you that information, but there's representatives from, from Washington Heights. We have a chairperson from the Heights, from Harlem, from the Midtown area, and from the Chinatown area. And we have the Alliance members, and then the focus group. The purpose of the focus group is that any business owner or somebody who is concerned about this can join the focus group. So I can get you all of that information if you have a specific interest in it. But I would say at least 35 to 40 people are on the bigger alliance, and then many more on the when you include the focus groups. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, it did. Thank you. And I just one follow up. You talked about shoplifting a lot throughout the 5-point plan. I'm curious if you're specializing in anything else, like for example, catering to food businesses or other types of businesses that may not have retail. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we I should have clarified that we call it Small Business Alliance, but it's really kind of we're bringing in a lot of other, we're dealing with big businesses, and we're also working with retail. We're working with pharmacies, met with somebody from a florist store in Chinatown. So really just anybody who's being impacted by shoplifting can be a part of what we're trying to do. Did that answer your question, or was there more to your question that I missed? No, that's fine. I mean, I guess only certain kinds of businesses actually, fall prey to shoplifting, right? Like, I'm not sure how much a restaurant does, or, other professional businesses.
Absolutely. Well, if a restaurant's a business, and if they're being impacted by people coming in and committing crimes in their business, we want to hear about it, and we want to work with them as well. And perhaps we would create another focus group around that if that seemed to be a need.
Okay, thank you.
And I do want to say that, Eric, I want to make sure, especially those who maybe are on the call that didn't hear our previous presentation where we talked about all the other priorities of the office, gun violence, hate crimes. We're doing a lot of work, and Eric isn't only working on small business or businesses and shoplifting. There's a lot going on. And so I do want everybody to know that we're available to work with you on any kind of public safety, community safety issue. And we know there's a lot going on right now and we're busy, but this is what our job is to work closely with the community to address the concerns. So please feel free to follow up with either me or Eric.
Perfect. Before I go to Stu, I just want to clarify a couple of the different categories of shoplifting that really pertain to this district. I think first and foremost is the drugstores. CVS, Duane Reade, even Target gets hit hard. With just anything that can be resold. And then the second piece is obviously, it's hit or miss, but it's more luxury goods. So I think they're two different buckets, not necessarily. We combine it all as shoplifting, but there's a lot of different issues within those streams there. So, and then of course, it's not shoplifting, but we do have a lot of burglaries overnight and commercial, which impact on restaurants and stuff like that. So, they may not be, having people come in and shoplift, but they're still feeling the impacts of.
Absolutely. And we want to meet with those people who are impacted by burglaries. And also they can reach out to us if they've been unfortunately impacted by a burglary, and we can tell them what's going on with their case. Everything that I said sort of applies to anything that is related to our office, we will follow up on. And in terms of the drugstores, we are meeting with the different drugstores, and we're meeting with some restaurants, but we're definitely meeting with a lot of the drugstores. And yeah.
All right. Sounds
and
good.
any ideas that you have for us to follow up? You mentioned the luxury goods and restaurants. We'll come out and talk with those groups as well, if you'd like us to.
Sure. Sounds good. We'll put everybody in touch. Let's go to Stu. You have a question, Stu?
Thank you. Can you describe the interventions or diversion programs and if they're novel or if they've been tried elsewhere?
So that's a great question. We're working on some of them. We're meeting with different providers throughout Manhattan to determine which ones would we want to divert people to. But they're similar to sort of what they were doing at Midtown Court, that kind of diversion. There's the navigators would be that they would be connected with somebody, and some communities have this already, but that they would be connected with an individual who could help them to really address sort of holistically what are the issues that are impacting the person. Yeah. And we're meeting with different community-based organizations, cases, and a number of other agencies to set up the process of referring people to them.
So you don't know the efficacy yet, but if somebody is rearrested after going through one of these programs, do they go to another program? What's the scheme?
It depends a little bit on what the arrest is. They may end up not being able to go. Again, it depends on the case. But we do know with some situations, like with substance abuse, that it may take one or two more times before they actually do accept the help and take the help. So again, it depends a little bit on the what's the underlying arrest and what the person did or didn't do in terms of their programming. And if people, Matt, if people are interested, I'm certainly not the expert on the diversion programs themselves. The person who oversees our Pathways to Public Safety unit used to run Midtown Community Court. And, I'm happy to bring her back to talk through if anybody's interested in what that looks like, what the new unit looks like. I will say it's still developing. Remember that they've only been in existence for 3 months, and there's never been a unit like this before. So she's really quite busy. She's also going to be overseeing, our reentry programming and restorative justice and other programs as well. But I'm happy to, if people want a deeper dive conversation about the programming and the referrals to programming, I'm happy to bring her back to talk to you all.
Sure. Yeah, maybe later in the year we can, once everything's up and running a little bit, we can circle back on that. Are there any other questions from the committee? All right. So I think overall, I think we've heard, the strategy here. I think there's a lot there. I think we kind of have to, take some, hypothetical cases and see how they're representative to what we see as a whole throughout the district, and just see, what's the impact. Are these people, put into programs? Is it beneficial? Are they going to jail? What's the nature of it? And that's really, it's too early to say, which of those prongs is going to be the most pertinent and successful here. But I think we have to kind of, track this at a high level and see where it goes.
Absolutely. And also keeping in mind the looking at the organized component to this as well, and kind of going further up and figuring out where there are organized entities that are doing this, that we really want to get some bigger cases around that. So if and people again can reach out to us if they have any questions about specific cases or have concerns about their businesses.
All right, sounds good. And so Brendan, if you guys get anything from the businesses at the board office, let's put them in touch with the DA's office where they can assist.
Absolutely.
All right. So Estelle, I thank you for joining us once again, and I'm sure we'll have you back in a few months or so, or sometime in the fall, and
Great.
we'll see where things are.
Definitely. And in the meantime, Eric will be available, and again, call us anytime for anything. Thank you.
All right. Very good. Thanks so much. All right. So Estelle Stryker-Santiago and Eric Straza from the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. So we'll move now to agenda item number 2, which actually deals with the governor's public safety plan. And as we were developing the agenda, the budget was still in formation and had not been finalized, but we do have some results, some public safety ads. And you might say, well, how does public safety directly become a budget item? But I think everybody's familiar with Albany politics to some extent. So Brendan, if you have that page that I sent you earlier, there's some other articles out there which kind of discussed, and they did actually have a last minute session and invited the public safety chairs and board chairs and perhaps district managers as well before the budget was finalized, really to kind of gather support and talk through some of the things that they were proposing. And I think, we don't need to read through this entire thing, but I will say that there's a few things I want to call out here. And of course, this is all after the fact. And, there was really no opportunity, for public input in the formal sense in the budget. It's backroom negotiations, of course. So if we can scroll down to the a couple of things. Okay, so yeah, stop right there. So a few things that we've been talking about on and off and have come up in other conversations over the past year or so. So this right here is important. The fiscal 23 budget expands the list of factors that judges must consider when setting bail, adding, so now they have to look at history of gun use or possession, which previously was only a domestic violence thing, any previous violation of an order of protection, and whether the charges alleged to have caused more serious harm to an individual or a group of individuals. So there'll be a few new things here as far as bail goes. The budget will also allow police to make arrests, which was a point of contention. Desk appearance tickets were just not getting the job done. I think, as we all know, that people go out and can commit other crimes while awaiting trial. So I think there's certainly a component to that. If you want to scroll down a little bit, so they've expanded. In a nutshell, they've expanded the some of the other offenses for bail. Wait, just scroll back up for a second. We'll send this to the committee so you can read through. There's really not a lot of action that we can take on this right now, unless as a committee, we want to discuss next steps. If there's anything else that we think we need to advocate for in here, but so any hate crimes will now be covered. So there's a few more things that'll now be bail eligible that were previously not. So I see your question.
Yeah, you said that desk appearance tickets weren't doing the job. Could you just elaborate on that?
I mean, so basically, it was basically a repeat. It was an inefficient action. So basically, if somebody commits a crime, all they can do is issue a desk appearance ticket, which really, in some of these cases, you need to be able to make the arrest and be able to put them through and bring them to a judge even that day, depending on the circumstances. I see Estelle, you're still on, so I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I'm happy. So a desk appearance ticket is it is an arrest, but it's an arrest where you're not held before you go in front of a judge. You're released and you're given a date when you come back. But then you do go in front of a judge and you're arraigned. The difference is that you're not held, for the 24, 48 hours period before going in front of a judge. And Matt, any point, you might have had enough of our office at this point because we've been at your meetings for a couple of times now. But if you ever want an ADA to come and walk the group through what happens from the time somebody's arrested to the time that the disposition happens, we're happy to do that. We actually have a really good presentation for that.
Yeah, I think that would be good. I think I've heard that a couple of years back, but I don't know that. I think this group would probably benefit from that. We don't have a lot of going on, so we'll definitely keep that in mind. Thanks. All right, so Brendan, if you want to keep scrolling down here. So I mean, a lot of the budget really tackles gun issues, and that was really what they were targeting there. But there were some things pertaining to hate crimes and some other things. But you guys we'll send you the link here. It's actually just on the governor's website. We'll send this out to everybody. But if there's any questions from the committee or the public, we can discuss that. Or if there's anything that you didn't hear about that you think should have been that needs to be brought to the attention of the governor or the state legislature, you can also entertain that. Lou?
I'm curious to find out what the approach to dealing with ghost guns is, which is a matter that is well beyond one district attorney, but what the approach should be and what recommendations we ought to make, perhaps to the state legislature.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. We should definitely, we can try to find somebody to speak on that. Did you have something else, Lou?
Perhaps we could have a presentation about ghost guns at the next meeting and begin to start to frame some thoughts as to how to address that problem.
All right. I'm not sure who would be the best person to speak on that. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. It is a timely issue, and it impacts more than just the district, but the city and much of the country. Seema?
I just wanted to mention that I know Brad Hoylman had introduced, the ghost gun legislation. I think he called it something like the Untraceable Firearms Act, which was signed by the governor.
Perhaps
So
we could get a
maybe-
perhaps we could get a copy of that and the legislative memorandum that accompanied it as opposed.
Yeah, all of that is public on the state Senate website.
Yeah, I mean, but yeah, the legislation piece, I mean, we can certainly, get from Hoylman's office as far as, a deeper conversation. I think we'd have to do some research and figure out who the appropriate parties are, but we'll work on something for next month if we can. Other questions on this topic? Lou, is your hand still up, or do you have another question?
No, I'm sorry. I thought my hand was down.
I see. Okay. So all right. So we'll try to do some follow up on ghost guns. Wait. Now you have another question, Lou? Or did you lower it and then I've lost track?
I thought I had lowered.
Okay. All right. Or maybe I thought I was going crazy there. Anyway, so we'll make sure everybody has a copy of this info. It's just a good summary. But I wanted everybody to be aware of the developments in Albany. So they did actually reach out to us prior to the budget, but it was a quick turnaround. It was like 3 hours notice when they scheduled the meeting, and they kind of walked us through a lot of stuff that they were working on, and some of it made it into the budget. So that is that. So the third item on the agenda is the discussion on workplace vaccine requirements. And you may say, well, is that really a public safety issue, or is that a health issue? So this came about this came about after the mayor created a vaccine exemption for professional athletes, which upset some people. And so it was discussed within the health committee, and I'm not sure if Elvie is on or wants to add anything here. But what happened was, it's going to be a joint, they wanted both the public safety committee to look at it after the health committee, and see if we had any thoughts on that. My personal view here is it should have been done quietly. But be that as it may, it's, to me, I think the bigger issues now, as far as vaccine requirements should be focused on, keeping up with the vaccine, keeping everybody vaccinated once, as far as booster shots go, and staying up to date there. So I'm not sure if this committee wants to, what angle we would want to take on this or anything. But I'll open up to the floor to the committee. Again, this is really this came about after the athlete exemption. There's also a lot of religious exemptions being given out all over the place. But I know there's people looking to rehire a lot of the municipal workers, a lot of the city workers that were let go because they didn't get vaccinated. So anyone have any thoughts on that? Steve?
Just to a question, are you saying some of these municipal employees have been let go when it was a requirement? Now the requirement's dropping. Are you saying that some of them are being hired because the requirement for vaccines are dropping?
No. So what's happened? And so it's still that, I know the key to New York City has been dropped, at least for now, which required proof of vaccination to enter most indoor establishments. But what this is referring to employer mandate, and more so with the athlete exemption that was created. So you recall that the mayor had a big press conference a few weeks back where he basically said that the hometown athletes can now play at home by creating an exemption there. So that's really where this came from. And a lot of people, felt that the virus doesn't discriminate between athletes and non-athletes. And it didn't sit well with a lot of people. Brendan, did you have something you wanted to add?
I was going to add something, but you said everything that I was going to say, just speaking to the sort of public employee side of things.
Okay. All right. Committee members, anything you want to add on this topic? I mean, we don't have to put forth a resolution, but there's certainly an opportunity to do so if you feel it's warranted.
And Matt, what would be the context of the resolution? It would be
so actually, you know what? I think LV is on, so I'm gonna let LV speak first, and then if there's still a question, I'll answer. LV, thank you.
It's basically supporting a resolution making the vaccination standard, making the vaccination requirements standard regardless of education, regardless of job or socioeconomic status.
Okay.
Got it. So basically saying that the athletes should have to abide by the rules that are the standard for everyone else. Got it. Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
All right. So how do we feel about that as a committee? I mean, like I said, I would want to work towards a standard where, we're now at the point where, booster shots are readily available. But the initial series that was administered, last year around this time for most people might be wearing off right now. If you haven't gotten your third shot, at least the third. I know the fourth shot is available to some. But I feel like we need to kind of get ahead of that one too, that, a two-dose vaccine might have been great last year, but I don't know how effective that's going to be going forward. So I would kind of tack on and say, and you can't really create a standard. You can't just say that, everybody needs to get a booster because, there's always, what if you have natural immunity and you were vaccinated? Because I think the one thing we now know is boosters have a short-term impact as far as extra protection goes. So it wouldn't make sense to, boost somebody right after they just recovered. So I think it's sort of a loose can worms there. Stu, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, so is Health and Human Services going to propose a resolution that we could then just attach to?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
It can be a joint resolution because there's a health component and there's also safety component.
So have you drafted the resolution already? If there's
No,
something that
no.
needs-
Not yet. We want to see if public safety also would like to join in drafting a resolution.
All right. Brendan, you have something?
Yeah, just to add to what LB said, since I was also the person staffing the health meeting last week, the committee's general where the committee wanted to go with this was that it wanted to hear what public safety had to say before proceeding on this any further as the health committee. Correct me if I'm wrong, LD.
Yes, yes.
All right. Lou?
Could whatever the health committee is drafting, could that be circulated to the committee as soon as possible so that we can make any suggestions or corrections or what have you before this goes to the full board?
So I'm not sure if anything has been drafted thus far, or if they're waiting for us to pass a, I don't know if they're gonna now pass a reso or if the sole resolution would come from our committee.
So we haven't drafted yet, but we can draft one and probably pass it on to you, and you can add something.
I think that
So
would be,
Go ahead, Lou.
that would be helpful before the full board meeting if a draft was circulated to the whole committee and then suggestions made as to what our contribution to the document would be.
All right, I just think through the timeline here. So we meet after the full board as a committee. So and I believe health does too. So if we take a vote tonight, we could put something before the board in May. If we wait for both committees to reconsider the matter in May, then it would be a resolution for June. I'm not sure how time sensitive it would be, but just think that through. Seema?
Oh, sorry. I just, I guess I don't know. To me, the mayor, personally speaking, the mayor looked like a fool with the exemption. It was actually not only athletes, it's athletes and artists who have the exemption. To me, he looked kind of like idiotic. I guess my question is, what are we doing? I mean, what jurisdiction do we have to put forward, something? I mean, we could just say like, oh, we thought the mayor's idea was idiotic and it should apply to everyone. However, we don't actually, as a community board, advise, the private sector in terms of what they should do. So I just feel like, there's already a vaccine mandate for the public sector. I just don't know what bang we would get except for just saying this is idiotic. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, let me know if I'm not being clear, but
No.
yeah,
I had similar questions too, before I even agreed to allow it on the agenda. As to really what it's already policy, it's an executive order. And there's no public review process for this. I mean, I think everybody's well aware of the importance of vaccines at this point. It's a silly loophole. So I really don't I also don't want to waste the committee's time with something that, I think most of us would agree was stupid and silly. But be that as it may, here we are discussing it. Steve?
Just trying to jog my memory. This was based on that article, right, where he's quoted saying he has to move the city forward, and I think it was called was it the celebrity mandate or something, where a lot of these talents were able to play in our neighboring state that has lifted any mandates, and were unable to play in our state because of the mandates. And the argument from these agencies and talent agencies and sports organizations was that they're unable to do business because a considerable amount of they just can't run a game, they can't run a show because of these mandates. And that's where I believe he brought up this exemption. That's correct. If is that what we're looking at here in terms of how is that observed in the public safety eye and how that affects us here as a community?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So if we draft a resolution, it's a disagreement on what the mayor has made. So we need to think about that.
Yeah, I mean, it could certainly be argued both ways that, athletes should be treated the same, that if you can't stop visiting athletes or visiting performers from performing in New York, then what's the purpose of trying to stop the hometown, the local athletes based in New York or performers based in New York? Yeah, I mean, it's legal loopholes. But yeah, I mean, I think the general message of standardization makes more sense. But
And at the same time, in the example of, say, a sporting event, and the athletes are exempt, the attendees, the audience, still adhere to the business's mandate, where everyone who's attending the stadium or the concert or whatever still need to be vaccinated to attend the game or show.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, well, actually, no, actually, that's not the case anymore. It was at the time under the key to New York City. But right now, anybody can, subject to the, it's up to the venue. But there's no requirement that attendees be vaccinated now either. So it simply speaks to the employer mandate. So I know there's a couple of different things when we all have to show proof of vaccination if we want to go in a restaurant or a museum or any kind of place. But now that requirement has gone away, at least for now. We're just talking the employer mandate, which created a silly loophole with athletes for the most part.
Just as a matter of record, performers in Broadway and off-Broadway theaters are not required to have a mask. In fact, given a performance, it's very difficult. However, the audience absolutely must wear a mask, and that's required from start to finish of a performance. And that's true of Broadway and off-Broadway theaters.
Yep.
Was that mandated by the theater themselves, the production, or is that citywide mandate?
I believe.
As far as I know, the theater community has made that decision as a matter of policy for all the theaters. You'd have to check with the city authority to find out whether that's a city rule or something that the theaters have decided on their own.
Right. And the reason why I ask is, are we at an awkward transition state? Because although testing rates have gone up, our hospitalization rate has stayed low and steady. And the mayor being, the mayor, he's forcing that transition in certain industries quicker, more than others. So because we're in this awkward position of moving from one position of health, public health and safety to another, it's are we kind of faced with a difficult decision to see if there's a resolution that makes sense for something that's a moving target? I'm playing a bit of devil's advocate here in terms of into another lens, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways you could argue this. I think that's kind of why both committees are looking at it. I mean, we're a public safety committee, so it's people are endangered if there's widespread transmission of the virus if they're not vaccinated potentially. I know there's different variants floating around right now that are not as severe as the original ones, but and obviously the rules, everything we're learning about vaccination and everything keeps evolving. So I know it's a bit of a moving target. So I don't know I think based on what we know today that, it's important for people to be vaccinated, but I'm not really sure that, there's anything, any real impact that a resolution issued by this board would have on the overall situation. So I'll leave it up to you guys. What do you feel are appropriate next steps? Anyone? Does anybody want? Okay, Stu.
Yeah, I always think it's good to express the sentiments of the community. So I would favor taking a look at this anyway.
So in that form, like, what would you? Should we put a resolution together? It can be very short and sweet. It can be, it doesn't have to be anything overly complicated, but just, a small expression of the sentiment.
I like short and sweet, but I'd kind of like to see, since the health committee took this up first, and has probably looked at this before, I'd kind of like to let them take the lead and then we can take a look at it.
So the general sense I get from this committee is, it's a public health issue, and it's, while it's subsequently a public safety issue, it's more a health issue, right? So the health committee should take a look, should take the first stab at the resolution. Is that what you guys are saying?
I would agree with that, but this can be distributed to us between meetings, right?
So if we're taking so Brendan, feel free to chime in here. If we vote on a resolution, it can be obviously written over the course of the next couple of weeks. If we do not take a vote, then any draft resolution would have to be voted on next month in committee, and then into full board in June. I'm pretty sure health committee meets after full board normally as well, so they would not have anything to the full board in May either at this point.
Yeah, from a procedural standpoint, if you want health to take the lead, you could take just sort of an informal vote saying that we favor, health drafting a resolution on this. But health isn't meeting until after full board in May. So, from a timing standpoint, regardless of what this committee decides, if it wants health to take the lead, then any resolution on this topic won't be before the full board until June.
Correct. Okay. Steve.
No, I'm just support Stu's observation about health taking the lead. Quite honestly, if you slice any of the committees, there's always a public safety component to many of the concerns. So since health has taken the first lead and has looked at this longer, I think it's fair to observe the efforts that they've made so far and see what it looks like in the public safety perspective afterwards. At least in the public safety perspective, I think it's we're in between, we're transitioning between where we are in terms of where we're highly, masked and protected to something in between. So would definitely like to see what's public health perspective on where we are today, because that will obviously help inform us to give a clear decision where we see this in a public safety perspective.
Okay. Seema?
I just want to kind of provide my perspective, which I think I'm in the minority, but Addons did this like a month ago in terms of the athletes and performers exemption to the citywide vaccine mandate. I just don't know what us putting something forward in June is really furthering. And I guess the point that I think Stu and others were making was that at least we're on the record, but he has already gotten so much flack from everywhere that this was like a really, I think, stupid idea. That I just feel like this is not worth our political will to also add fuel to that specific fire. When I think we could best leverage our will for, other things that like are much more timely or much more important too. just
Yeah.
from my perspective. So,
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, I don't really think, I personally don't think the resolution, I'm happy to put it forth if the committee wants to entertain that, but I don't think there's going to be a lot of impact there. But that's why I would, if we are going to get back to the health committee, I would suggest that they take, put a little bit, what's the next step as far as the employer mandate goes, as far as boosters go. That would be my comment to the health committee is, at some point, I know they tried to administer policy with healthcare workers and there were staffing issues, or something along those lines that prevented boosters from being a part of this. But I think, we're a year into the rollout of the vaccine, the initial series of the vaccine. And I think we kind of need to, I would ask the health committee in conjunction, if you want to slap the mayor, that's fine. But, I would say, let's take the lead and say, what does the future hold? Because if people aren't up to date with their vaccine series, then we may see some unsafe things happening. But that's just my take. Stu?
I'm just thinking that the calendar is to our benefit here because we'll see what happens in the next month and then we can decide if we would move forward with this or not.
So Brendan, procedurally, do we need to take a vote on anything, or just in conversation? Can LV take our conversation back to her committee for next step?
Procedurally, LV can take the conversation back to the health committee. If the public safety committee wants the health committee to take the lead on this and LV is here, that can be relayed to health committee members who can figure out how best to proceed.
Okay. All right.
There is an alternative if we want to get into it. If there's an interest in having a discussion on this, a notice could be sent out and the two committees could meet in special session, provided it's noticed to the mailing list in the world and the full board. And that means the two committees could sit together and frame out a uniform position in caucus, and then a document or position that the two committees have agreed on could then be introduced to the board at the May meeting. There is a little time to do this. And it's also very much a precedent of the board to call special meetings on dealing with issues like this.
Brendan, there's something you had?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I know back when we were in person, there were certain caucuses that happened during meetings, but we've tried to explore ways to have caucuses happen on Zoom during full board meetings, and we haven't found really a feasible way to do a caucus. I don't know if that's what Lou is talking about, like a caucus during the meeting, but I just wanted to clarify.
This would be a special meeting called by the two committees, and then using email, and everybody could be informed that the meeting was taking place, and people who want to sit in on it could do so by Zoom. But it would also get the two committees to a uniform position and be able to do it within a reasonable time frame, perhaps even by the May meeting, if there's that sense of urgency.
Yeah, I mean, part of me, says that this is probably not an issue that we want to inconvenience everybody over by calling special meetings. This is not an issue where we have to provide feedback to an agency by a certain date. I would prefer that, save those meetings for circumstances like that. But I don't know, Seema, what do you want to add?
no, I just wanted to add, I mean, I think it's telling, I find it telling, and LV, please correct me if I'm wrong, that health didn't unanimously agree to write a resolution on this. I mean, we all just collectively said this is a public health issue, And health was like, yeah, we're not sure. What do you guys think? So I don't think that my understanding of the situation is that there was not strong sentiment all around, because if there was, I believe my understanding again is that health would have said, we're doing this. So I think that is very telling.
Go ahead, Elvie.
Yeah, Seema is right. There is a health concern and safety concern, but do we want to go against the mayor's mandate?
Yeah, it's a tough issue. You know, I mean, there's different angles. I mean, you know, but again, I would say that, you know, even though the mandate is out there, there's tons of religious exemptions being granted to people all over the place. So, you know, it's not, doesn't help the safety aspect of it. But that's just the way it is. You know, laws are the laws. So I would say, you know, we've discussed it. You know, I think there could be a resolution on this, but it's not something that, you know, I think is clear cut. So I would say, you know, I think the health committee should take the lead on this one. You know, I will, you know, we'll work to support as well. I know that pushes the timeline a little bit, but I'd rather get it right than rush it forward in May. Anyone else?
I will take that to my committee, Matt. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Elvie. Yeah. I mean, if there's, you know, and if there's anything, you know, we're happy to partner. It's just, I think the position, you know, it's just unclear what the statement really should be at this point. I mean, the damage is done as far as the athlete exemption. I don't think that's going to be reversed. But I think it's more a matter of, I think what we want to convey to the public is the vaccine is very important. You know, I know a lot of people look up to athletes and stuff as role models. And if you know, suddenly they're, you know, not required to get the vaccine, you know, what does that say about the seriousness of the situation? So I think that's more the forward-leaning position that I would take, but I'll leave that up to the health committee to kind of come back to us with.
All right. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Elvie.
You're welcome.
Anything else before we move to budget items on the vaccine? All right, so thank you for the thoughts on that. So now we're going to talk about fiscal 2024 budget requests. So Brendan has the air table so basically, I think most of you are familiar with the procedure here. We're basically providing feedback to the Budget Governmental Affairs Committee on issues that pertain to public safety, and they'll fit it into the district needs, or whatever, the budget requests, or whatever they're calling it these days. So I believe our standing requests here, so these are both capital, right? Security cameras.
Yes, they're both capital. They're both capital requests.
Okay. Does everyone understand capital versus expense?
What would be an example of an operational or expense that was budgeted last time?
Brendan, do we have any actual examples? Whether they're
Would that be like a traffic officer or something like that, or?
Yeah, I mean, basically anytime you're not building something.
Yeah. So, for example, things that involve programmatic expansions of existing programs, like, this is not for public safety, but full restoration of sanitation street side wastebasket service. There's already wastebasket service, but calling for a full restoration of that service That's expanding an existing program. That's an example of an expense request. And then capital requests, yeah, call for building new things, adding new things. So things like security cameras for Bellevue South Park, which is one of the 2 requests for this committee that involves installing something new, as opposed to expanding upon something that already exists.
Thank you.
Makes sense. Okay. So as far as were the 2 that you showed us before, the for Bellevue South, was it Dagham? Oh, those are the only 2 public safety requests as of now, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So are there any requests from the committee? Any new? So does everybody believe that these? So these are still. So these. Did we get any feedback? I guess from. So these are not new, right? So have we gotten any feedback in the past?
Yes. And just so you know, for anyone who looks at the budget requests Airtable, there is a field called agency response. Each year, and this is just to explain for some of our newer members, each year, after we submit our budget requests, we get responses on our requests from the agency that the request is most relevant to. So in both of these requests, the relevant agency is the NYPD. And it's worth noting that in both of these cases, the response is Argus cameras are funded via allocations from elected officials for use within their precincts. And that's, as I said, the response for both of these security camera requests. So I don't know if that means that the committee might want to think about how it might want to advocate for these cameras to the relevant elected officials with Bellevue South. I'm almost certain that would be Councilmember Rivera, and Doug Hammarskjöld would be Keith Powers. But that's something for the committee to think about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little more. I'm familiar with both, but as far as the Dag Hammarskjöld one, that falls within the confines of the 17th precinct, where I serve as the community council president, and the organization Friends of Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza has come to us many times, and they've also lobbied Keith Powers as well, and I believe Keith verbally agreed to put cameras there. I'm not sure what fiscal year that would be, or what funding he would be using for that. It did appear as one of his participatory budgeting items for that little amount that was allocated to participatory budgeting, but it did not win the vote. So, but I do believe Keith is aware of that one and is working on some sort of fund, and we can confirm with his office. As far as Bellevue South, I know that's been an issue for few years now, but so I would say until they're implemented, I'd say we should, or until funding is committed, we should leave those on there. But I think separately, realistically, you can't just put something on here and expect it to get done. This is like the official statement of the community board, and that being said, there's still additional efforts that we need to take offline to ensure that they actually happen. Especially with something like this, where security cameras are a specific request at a specific location. So I think what I will do, Brendan, is I will touch base with the council offices and the respective precincts to see where things stand as far as any allocations for funding. So I guess we can leave these on here. I think Reshma is meeting in June next with her committee to talk through any budget items. So that it's not completely time sensitive, but I'll certainly report back on these. Any questions, concerns on these particular items, and we'll see if there's any other things that should belong in there. Good, okay. So as far as other items go, the one thing that I mentioned a couple months ago was with regards to security in homeless shelters. So I'm not sure exactly how it's funded, but I would think, I think we need to, part of this public safety issue, and you could argue whether it should be public safety or housing and homelessness, that committee, but I think something should be added. And Brendan, I don't know if we have anything in the air table as far as shelter security, but I think there's an obvious opportunity to improve security in certain facilities.
As far as I can tell, there isn't anything on that specific topic.
Okay. So what do you guys think? So obviously the 30th Street Men's Shelter is the big one in our district. They don't really have a lot of transparency with the community as far as what crime is taking place. But the word on the street for the homeless population is that it's a war zone in there. And having been in that facility many times for meetings over the years, I can attest to the concerns if I was not being escorted by DHS or employees. But so I think there's an issue there. And then, as I mentioned, the women's shelter on 45th Street is a constant waste of precinct resources. So I think the wording in here would be at the discretion of, based on crime. Steve, you have something you want to add?
You mentioned discretion. Both of these locations don't provide that much detail in terms of their clients and any crimes that's associated. Is that something that can be observed in terms of a research or observation, that to have a better understanding? Because perception kind of may skew us to make the wrong decisions for certain locations if some locations are functioning better than others. Just didn't have a chance to present the facts in front of us, because right now I talked to a couple of facilities, and the first observation was that crime was going to go up, but after a few months of running, some of these facilities are running perfectly fine because they have funding, because they have resources. So one of the things be nice to do is to clear up some of those perception with some facts.
Yeah, so you're never going to get clear-cut facts unless you probably a freedom of information request, which is not something we're going to be able to do. So the wording I would use, and it's probably not, and the budget committee can do it, can finesse it however they want, is what I would do is put in there funding for DHS police for homeless shelters in our district as deemed necessary by the precinct commanders. They'll have better line of sight to what's actually happening. And if there's inadequate security, the next level of safety, it falls to the precincts to respond. So I think that's really the concern here is I don't want our officers going to homeless shelters every time there's a dispute. And every time that there's, basically inadequate security. So I think I would put it in, I'm not sure what the budget ask would be, but I would put some wording along those lines. Because to your point, we will never get clear-cut statistics and data as to what's happening in these facilities, but there's a clear and present danger in many of them. I don't know who was first here. I'm gonna go Eric, Stu, Seema. Eric?
Yeah, I was just gonna underscore what you're saying is that it feels like security and funding is needed in the shelters for the safety of the residents and for others. And yeah, if there's anything we can do to help, I'm certainly supportive of it.
Stu?
Why can we not, as a community board, submit a FOIL request?
I'm not saying we can't. I'm just saying that you would have to do it on an ongoing basis. And those tend to be very time consuming, and they're not very timely in response times ordinarily. So, I mean, if you want to be my guest, but I can probably track down some info through the precincts a little bit faster, but it's not going to be as cohesive as we want it to be. But you know, if DHS Police was the security provider in some of these facilities, I think you'd have a little bit more transparency, or at least the ability to get information. When you're dealing with private security, there's really no standard. Seema?
I just wanted to ask, actually, Brendan, do you want to, it sounds like you put your hand up related to FOIL. So if you want to respond to that, if not, I can share my comment.
Yeah, I'm going to speak a little bit from experience as someone who's had to put in FOIL requests for a variety of things over the years. Sometimes it can take as much as 6 months to get answers on a FOIL request, which from a time standpoint, you would put things at potentially late October, which is the time of year when we're supposed to be submitting our budget requests to the city.
Yeah. And by the time you make the request, you're going to hear about things that happened prior to your request, 6 months later, potentially, which doesn't tell you if things are getting better or worse. It just gives you that snapshot in time, if you're lucky to even get that information. So I would not recommend that as a tool. That's why I would leave the money at the discretion of professionals who can recommend when to utilize that, because they would have information. We're not going to get that information all that readily, except maybe anecdotally. Seema, did that answer your question? Or
no, I just wanted to, I actually have a departure in terms of my thinking as it relates to this potential budget request.
Okay.
So a few things. One, I know DHS is like trending towards like trauma-informed care, which essentially puts like the client at like the center of the experience. And, one of the things that they have stated, and then I've read that they've stated publicly, which is like they don't want to criminalize being homeless, because that in and of itself is not, a criminal activity.
Right.
So I want to be careful with what we are recommending or potentially, proposing in terms of budget requests. I would have seconded Steve's idea around, conducting research or a study, but I do completely hear what you're saying, which is it potentially wouldn't be that effective or yield, usable information. However, is there a way for us to understand what current staffing of like security guards currently is? Because maybe instead of saying like, let's add more security guards at the discretion of, whatever, the NYPD, I'd rather we say something like, let's add whoever's there, let's make that position 24 hours, like let's make it more specific. And or let's say, we would like to limit it to potentially one additional security person. Because if we don't accurately have a sense of crime, I don't want to go on hearsay. However, I do understand that you have like more insight than I do, obviously, into all of this. So if you're like, if you tell me that, whatever, this is like out of control, I would believe you. But I just don't want to, make funding decisions based on hearsay, especially as DHS is, trending towards trauma-informed care, which is trying to decriminalize being homeless.
Yeah. So there's a lot there. So yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. I mean, I'm not saying that we should commit to anything tonight. I mean, the budget process goes, I think, all the way through the fall. So we have some time on this. So what I will do for May is try to get the precincts to come on and give us they can at least speak to how their resources are being used. And it's not so much the amount of security that you're seeing, it's the fact that they don't have arrest capabilities. That anytime a situation escalates, and it could be a minor dispute. It doesn't have to be a significant crime. It's just now you're asking, now police officers are being called to the scene through 911 on a fairly regular basis, sometimes many times a day. And that's just not, how we want our officers being used on a regular basis. So I think that's really where the funding ask would come in. But I hear what you're saying. We can certainly get some statistics behind it and figure out exactly, how it would work. But I think there's an opportunity for improvement there. I'm not sure what the right ask would be either. So I'll get the right people to our May meeting, and we'll see what they recommend.
There's a wild
Thank
card
you.
involved here also, because the New Providence Women's Shelter on 46th Street is going to be deactivated. The buildings are going to be gutted and rebuilt, and that's going to change the equation. But I do think that we ought to ask the agency to send a representative to a committee meeting so that we can get a full handle on what's going to happen at New Providence, but also to examine the situation at the 30th Street shelter, which has been a problem for a long time. And I think that inviting the agency to send somebody to the committee, we can get a full discussion on a continuing basis on how to address that problem particularly.
Okay. I think our agenda for May is filling up a little bit, so we may actually have to have a June meeting, which, as we learned in exec last night, might actually have to be in person. Because I think June 8th, the day of our June full board, is the last opportunity for virtual as it stands today. So I think we'll try to do, I don't want to stray too far into the homelessness aspect of it. That's more for the Housing and Homeless Committee. What I do want to keep our lens on is the security aspects of it, which are a big piece to the puzzle there. So I'll see what we can do, how much else. I think we can get somebody from DHS, which oversees the 30th Street facility. And I think we can get the precincts to send somebody to talk to us about how their resources are being deployed and what's happening in the shelters, because we have had some assaults and things like that. It's not, it's not an everyday occurrence, but sometimes it's really you only need one or two events in the course of a month to make the population prefer to be on the streets where they feel safer. So I'm going to go to Steve, and
if there's some hesitancy on the part of the agency, we ought to ask council members Rivera and Powers to support our effort to get the agency to come to the meeting to answer direct questions. I think that would be very helpful.
all right, Brendan, I would want to do it for May, but I think our agenda might be a little busy. We already have a couple of items. So I think, Brendan, let's try to get DHS scheduled for June. And I'll schedule the precincts around that as well.
Okay.
And that still gives the budget committee enough time to work with it, right?
Yes, it should.
Okay. Because I know Reshma initially gave us a deadline in the fall, which, summer break happens and the rest of the year just seems to fly by. So I want to get a grip on that. I think we can do our due diligence over the next couple of months. If I hear of any specifics, I'll get it out in an email in between, and then we'll reiterate it at the next meetings. Steve?
Sorry, I get myself off of mute. Yes, I in terms of like research, it wasn't only just for the aspect of going FOIA, but I just collecting research in general. I wholly support the idea of reaching out to the precincts as they are boots on the ground that observe that they're seeing at these facilities. I do like the idea of reaching out to someone at DHS to talk their piece. And I like also the idea of the council members also being involved, because some of the discussions that they had in the Housing and Homeless Committee is that DHS recognizes their public facilities, but they don't count the private ones. And a lot of these new sites that are being funded by the Honda bill, like bed stabilizations and other facilities, hotels that have been converted, they're not officially run by DHS, right? So, but the people at the council members' offices, Powers and Rivera, will hear conversations come from those locations and those neighborhoods, and so will the NYPD. So it's going to have to be like across information across all those resources, and that would fit in for this year's budget request. But I wouldn't shy away for also if we do have to submit for a FOIA request, because these challenges that we're seeing with the housing facilities, they're not going to go away in 2022. They'll be around with us in 2023. And even if it's an observation of a snapshot of just this year, and then we do another request next year, we'll see the change rate, right? And see if there is a need for next year's budget increase or decrease or stay in terms of whatever our decision might be in terms of housing security.
Yeah, I mean, but again, I would say there's no guarantees with FOIL requests, and the answers you get might be very different a year apart. So I would not want us to rely on that as the sole source of information. If it can provide backup information, that's one thing, but I don't, I would not recommend anybody utilize their time that way. It's, unless you're a member of the press or something and you're doing it professionally, I wouldn't go there personally. We can track down enough information to get a grip on the situation. There might be some nice to have nuggets that they're not going to be willing to give us, but I think if we ask the right questions, I think we'll get better answers. But it's, when you just ask for a blanket, what's going on, or what crime is taking place, or how many crimes are you seeing, that's where you get varying levels of detail and not necessarily a clear picture over a period of time. So yeah, well, again, I don't want to get too far off on this. This is, we're talking about possible budget requests for the fiscal 2024 budget, which would be submitted in collaboration with the budget committee over the next several months. So we have a little time here. So if you guys think of anything, if anybody has anything tonight, feel free to put it on our radar and research. Eric?
Yeah, I just wanted to, and I was following most of the conversation, but just in terms of data, if we're asking for data for this, I assume we've got data for the security cameras, the DAG cameras.
Well, yeah, security cameras are a little bit different because we can easily document.
And the other location too.
Yeah. I mean, security cameras.
I guess the question is, have we, right? Do we have the data on why we need it there? What's the crime levels?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of
number of
times.
incidents. Yeah.
I hear what you're saying. It's not always the amount of crime. It's, a lot of it's quality of life when it comes to security cameras. So if people can't enjoy their parks because there's homeless individuals occupying, sleeping on the bench, or people shooting up drugs, like those are all kinds of things that don't necessarily get documented as crime, but they're deterrents for, and prevent people from enjoying the public spaces as they're intended. So I think it's a little bit different, but there's a lot of quality of life issues that come into play there. So it doesn't all fit within a crime statute.
Yeah. I mean, I would just say then the same thing would go with the shelters, that we should be doing a qualitative research of the residents to see how their quality of life is affected by things that aren't crimes. It just feels like it's pretty inconsistent, and we're taking the word of residents who feel unsafe walking somewhere. And we want data for requests at the shelter, but we don't require that data elsewhere.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, so yeah, we'll try to piece together as much information as we can. But again, with I'm not pretending we have all the answers as far as shelter and security. But I would want funding available for people, for the people who are now utilizing resources when they shouldn't be using them, for a professional determination to be made as to what the best case provides. But a lot of times the security providers that are in these facilities are generally a result of lack of funding. So you get what you pay for, generally. But I think we'll leave this one there. I want to hear from you guys if you have any other. We'll obviously follow up on this either next month or in June. But I want to hear from you guys. Do you have any other possible budget items? Again, it can just be an idea. It doesn't have to be, a full-fledged idea. It can be something that we can research. Seema?
Yeah, I mean, just hearing from the DA's office earlier, I was thinking like, are there other potentially promising programs, potentially like,
I think you just
sorry,
muted.
that we want to keep funding, or at least want to put on a radar that could be part of, some type of larger budget. Like, she talked about these navigator things. I don't know. I just like, it just got me thinking about other potentially promising programs that relate to public safety that maybe we want to, recommend other neighborhoods do or other boroughs do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's that's actually a good segue into something that we should be looking. I mean, they are looking for community-led solutions, as you heard Estelle say, but I'm not sure. I think that might be, an offline conversation that we have there, like, for District 6 from Stuytown to East Midtown, where are the shortfalls basically, in terms of where are the gaps in programming they see, and then from there we could probably put together an ask. So I don't know, Eric, you're still on. Do you happen to know anything?
I am, yeah. Well, I think it's great that you guys are even considering something like this. It's something that I want to bring back to the office. I don't personally feel comfortable, recommending certain programs or something like that. But I have heard along the way, during my relatively short time here already, that a lot of the issues have to do with insufficient funds and funding like that we have people ready to do things, and even some organization, at least some semblance of an organization set up, and it's really just the funding. So I'll take that back to the office. I can reconnect with you guys on that as well. Maybe other people internally have some ideas, and yeah, I'm happy to follow up on that too.
Yeah, I think that would be great, because there's a lot of different needs out there as far as programming goes, but I think if we put together the right ask, and something that would actually be highly effective, I think there's a good chance we could get some funding there, because that is certainly top of mind across most of Manhattan, especially in Midtown. All right, very good. Thank you, Eric, and thank you, Seema. Anything else that we want to float for budget? We'll put the budget items back on probably the next couple of months, until the actual deadline. So there'll be more opportunities if you think of something tomorrow or in a few weeks. And, we can certainly talk about it. Again, we're putting it to the budget committee. It doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be any funding, but I think as long as we start the conversation and we loop in the right people, whether it be the elected officials, the city council level, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, or possibly even at the state level, I think there's different avenues we can try once we have the right idea. But it all comes down to what we're able to find out. So thanks everybody for the budget conversation. I think we made some progress there, and have some good next steps to follow up on. Anything else for 2024? Or go to the chair's report? All right, so chair's report will be very quick. So actually, I don't know, Seema, do you want to discuss the presentation for next month?
Sure. Yeah, sure. So we actually had a meeting, Matt, Brendan, and I, a few weeks ago to meet with the team leading the New York City Commission on Human Rights. And in addition to being like an internal advocacy organization, they actually host a number of like, you know, upwards of 10 or 15 trainings for the public as it relates to a variety of different human rights law, as well as public safety information. So, you know, New York City human rights law is like the most stringent in the country. They could come and do a training on that for, you know, for either just our committee, our full board, potentially even something public that we do, you know, with anyone in the community. And, you know, the second, like, so that the New York City human rights law was like something that I think we found appealing. And then the second set of trainings or workshops that they could do are all around bystander intervention. So, you know, what if you see something, say something, like, you know, we've all heard that on the MTA, et cetera, et cetera. But this like practicalizes this. So like, what do you actually do if you see something? And I actually sat in on Councilmember Rivera had them come and host a training on bystander and intervention. I actually went to it last week. It was really, I thought really interesting and really broke it down. So we don't need to pick whatever training we want them to host or anything like that right now. I just wanted to let everyone know that they will be coming to our May meeting for a full presentation to this committee, explaining everything that they do and all the trainings and programs that they run and that they will be willing to run. And then we can decide either in June or, you know, later in this year, you know, what we actually want to host. So I'm just teasing this, you know, presentation by them to our committee for next month.
Perfect. Thanks, Seema. Yeah, so I think that'll be a good overview. You know, like she said, they do offer a lot, so I think we'll get in a good overview next month, and then we can figure out where to go from there. So I think that's all I had as far as the chair's report. You know, obviously we'll follow up on a lot of these items over the next few weeks. So I would plan to meet in June. I don't ordinarily like to have a June meeting, but I think there's a few things going on. So just be aware that meeting may have to be in person based on what we learned last week in the state budget. That there are actually specific guidelines. Kyle and the board office will communicate more on that, but that did come up last night in exec, and June 8th would be the last day currently that we can continue in the current format. So more to come there. Does anyone have any items of old or new business?
Move to adjourn.
Wait, both
wait,
Stu
wait,
and
wait.
Eric from the DA's
We
office.
do have a
are
couple of
raised.
hands. Eric?
Yeah, thanks so much, Matt. So I just wanted to go over really quickly, being mindful of time, I will make it quick. A few more updates from our office. This is normally where I would go into the Small Business Alliance, but Estelle did a great job of giving an overview on that, so can just move past it. One other thing that you mentioned that I just wanted to expand upon a little bit was the new Pathways to Public Safety division at our office. So this was created to address things like mental health, substance abuse, and addiction, things like that. Connecting people to services early on and identifying those individuals to connect them to things like, and I know that there was a question, I believe, asking for examples of these alternatives to incarceration. So, I mean, two things right off the top of my head that I usually announce are things like specialized court parts using the Midtown Community Court. So for example, like the mental health court that they have. And then also another example would be something like drug addiction, social services. So basically connecting individuals to those types of things to address those issues early on, to prevent them from developing and then potentially becoming violent in the future. Number two, I just wanted to update you guys as well on our hate crimes unit is being expanded. We're basically building out the unit. Unfortunately, if you guys may have heard that there has been an increase in hate crime cases in the borough of Manhattan recently. So we're building out the unit to address things like that. Basically giving it support from our executive team. We're adding 2 deputy chiefs. And then we're also, some of these cases tend to be a little bit more complex and deal with more sensitive issues. So we're cross-designating multiple assistant district attorneys from our trial bureaus, which is basically the arm of the office that addresses cases that come in after an arrest, things like that. So these attorneys typically have more experience with those kind of cases. So again, the support and the resources given to the unit will allow us to do things like increase the unit's proactive investigations and prosecutions, increase language competencies, ensure internal staff and police officers receive adequate specialized training, because again, some of these cases have more complex elements or more sensitive elements, strengthen victim services and expand community engagement, things like that. So again, if you or anyone that you guys know have been the victim of a hate crime, I encourage you to call our office and report it. I can put all of my contact information into the chat because I know that this is my first public safety meeting. In doing so, I will also put the hate crimes hotline into the chat as well. Last 2 things really quick, or 2 events that are actually coming up. And I have flyers as well, if that's at all helpful in any way. You can request them virtually and I can be in touch to provide those. The first one being the New York Crimes Victims Candlelight Vigil is taking place this Sunday, April 24th from 2 to 4 p.m. at the West End Collegiate Church, which is located on 245 West 77th Street and West End Ave. Encourage anyone who wants to attend or anyone you know who wants to attend to do so. And then also we have our Gun Violence Prevention Fellowship. The deadline to apply for this was extended to April 22nd. So actually tomorrow by 5 p.m. If you know anyone that wants to apply, we're looking for 1 to 2 young individuals, either college students, high school or GED students graduating in by June of 2022. Basically to come in, learn about how gun violence is impacting the community, draft initiatives and policy plans, policy proposals to then present at the end of the fellowship. And then they will, potentially get to see, have a cool experience of potentially seeing some of these initiatives and policy plans enacted or put into practice. So we're looking for specifically individuals who have been impacted by gun violence, whether directly in their communities or through their families. And if anyone wants more information on that, you can feel free to contact me, or if you have any questions, want me to elaborate on anything, either here or offline. Again, I'll put my information in the chat and you guys can feel free to follow up whenever, again, because this is my first public safety meeting going forward. I look forward to attending them. Also the CB6 full board meetings. I recognize some people, but if you guys ever need anything from our office, please feel free to reach out and I will be the point of contact going forward. So looking forward to working with everyone.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Eric. So Brendan, can we add some of that to the newsletter if we haven't already?
Yeah, absolutely. Eric, if you can send that information over to us via email, we can make sure to include some of that information you mentioned.
Absolutely. Thanks again.
Thanks.
Thanks, Eric. All right, Stu, you have an item of new business?
Yes. From a somewhat different angle, I propose that the committee discusses qualified immunity with consideration of a resolution supporting the bills that are currently in the state legislature to override it. There is, I guess, nothing about QI that can't be contested, but I think it's fair to describe it as a rule that was crafted by both liberal and conservative justices of the Supreme Court out of whole cloth, and that despite some pretensions, it's designed to protect individual police officers from being sued no matter how egregious their conduct. There are a number of cases that could be used to exemplify how QI operates, but I think a classic one is a case out of California called Jessup, where police officers stole almost $300,000 from a pair of Mormon business partners. And the court said that because of QI, the victims could not even sue the officers to recover the money that was stolen from them. So this is really what it boils down to. A police officer violates your rights and you're not allowed to sue that officer. A number of states now are planning on moving toward, I guess, banishing QI from state courts, even though it won't disappear from the federal court, at least not until the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act is passed, if ever. But a major reason that QI is hard to get rid of is that police officers perceive incorrectly that if they do something a little bit wrong and get sued, they could lose their house. And in reality, police virtually never pay settlements out of their own pockets, no matter how heinous the conduct. So the primary consequence of qualified immunity is to deprive victims of police misconduct of their day in court, deprive them of the opportunity to vindicate their rights, deprive them of monetary compensation that they would otherwise be paid from the municipality. And the fallout from this is that governments and police departments are not incentivized to preclude the sort of bad conduct that might wrongfully kill or injure or, an innocent person. So I think there are advocates both for and against qualified immunity we could bring in to speak, and it seems like a timely matter for the community board to discuss.
Thanks, Stu. Yeah, we'll try to. So I have the bills that you sent over earlier. We'll try to track down. I don't know. We may not be able to get to it until June at this point, but we'll definitely put it on the radar and we'll see who we can get to speak on those matters. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for bringing that up. Steve?
I'd like to have someone from the precincts Build a Block program come and introduce themselves. 17th precinct, Sector Adam, did theirs yesterday. And they have actually quite a few overlapping topics that we try to cover. For instance, in our February discussion, we talked about potentially putting scams, different types of scams that's going on. And yesterday's Build a Block meeting did mention the numerous scams that they're seeing in our neighborhoods, ranging from romance scams to moving scams to targeting the elderly. Plus, they're the ones who also see the day-to-day to our block by block, by business to business, including homeless shelters, including restaurants. So I think it'd be nice to kind of introduce them and learn from what they're seeing on the streets, and it'll probably help guide us on some of the things that we're discussing today.
Yeah, I'll see what I can do. So, the neighborhood coordination officers are very localized. So our district covers 2 precincts, which I think would be like 6 or 7 sectors. So each NCO team covers a sector of a precinct. So I think you'd be looking at 6 or 7 across all of CB6. So that might be a little challenging to get them on. But what I could do is probably invite the 2 sergeants that oversee them. I mean, because typically we get commanding officers or somebody that's a little higher up, which sits behind a desk all day. So I understand your point there. I'll see who the right people are. I don't think we can get too granular in these forums. So I would again suggest you go to my precinct council meetings on the 17th. Those are the last Tuesday of every month. And then the 13th, I believe, is the Tuesday prior to this meeting. So what is that, like the 3rd Tuesday or something like that? So that's where you can.
Yeah, I'm not looking for granularity. I have been taking notes for the past couple of years since they started the program, for at least my neighborhood. And there is just a common pattern across the board that a sergeant would recognize where certain cases are on the rise, certain cases are steadying off. So I wouldn't ask for a ground level on the floor NCO, but someone higher up at a managerial level that are seeing common trends.
Yeah, I mean, we'll fit them in. You know, scheduling is always difficult. You know, on a Thursday evening. But I'll see what I can do. It'd probably be June or October. Can't do any NYPD things in September with the General Assembly.
That's fine. I think the 17th precinct's rounds of build-a-blocks are not until July anyway.
Yeah, they do them every quarter. So your neighborhood is the front month of the quarter, so July and then October, whereas people in Turtle Bay would be like the next month, and then the Sutton area would be the following month. And I'm
So
sure
June, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we can try to promote those meetings and see where there's common ground, but for the most part, those meetings are intended to allow you to have a more detailed discussion about what's happening in your particular neighborhood, your particular block. These meetings are more like the whole community district. So we'll see what we can do. But I'll try to do something with NYPD, but it probably won't be till October. Eric, you have something else?
Yeah, really quick, just in addition to that. So I actually came from the office. I worked in the office for 3 years in the Financial Frauds Bureau. I was an analyst there. And a lot of what Stephen just described is a lot of what we do in that bureau. So would encourage anyone, if you guys have specific cases, either ongoing or that you'd want to report them to the bureau as well. If it's helpful, I can include the financial frauds hotline in the chat as well. If you guys, not specifically only you guys, but if you were to hear of that in the future, because as Stephen said, it is an ongoing issue in your community. If you would want to pass on that number as well.
We'll take the information and pass it on throughout the community. Thanks, Eric.
Great. Yeah.
All right. Any other items of old or new business? All right. I'll entertain Lou's motion to adjourn. And meeting is adjourned at 8:28. So thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.